Happy to chair this session on how various genres influence academic writing. We're going to start with Dr. David Hadar from Beit-Berl College, and then there'll be Dr. Claudie Tal from the Vinsky College of Education, and the third one will be Nardine Dove from Tel Aviv University. Remember, please, speakers, you have exactly 10 minutes. And then after the three speakers, we'll have the time for questions. So think of some inspiring questions, and hopefully we'll have enough time to answer them. Okay, so over to you, Dr. David Hadar.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to read from the page, and I hope I'll meet the time limit. Yep. Okay, so writing for the newspaper. I don't do it anymore, but I'm glad that I did do it. In fact, I want to encourage instructors here on all levels to facilitate or encourage or simulate at least participation in writing for the general public. In the spirit of online communication, I'm going to offer this as a listicle, and I'm going to give you three lessons that I learned from writing in the newspaper for Haaretz. So first, a brief autobiographical introduction. So I started reviewing when I was an MA student in English literature at the Hebrew University, and I was writing an MA about Philip Roth, the American writer. During a social meeting, I offered to write a short article about the Jewish mother in Philip Roth for a magazine edited by Benny Mel, who was also an assistant editor for Haaretz Tarbut and Safrut. When a new translation of Portnoy's complaint came out, Benny offered me to write a review about it for the newspaper, and I said yes. It was published a number of weeks after I submitted it. And then I suggested that I could go on reviewing, and indeed I did. At about midway, I moved from the cultural supplement Tarbut v'Sifrut to Haaretz Sfarim, which is really dedicated only to book reviews. In 2016, when I was already doing my postdoc in American literature in Berlin, I stopped writing reviews for the newspaper. Why? There are a number of reasons, but one of them could possibly be that I felt like I learned all I had to learn at that moment from reviewing for the newspaper. There was a sense that I did it and I could move on to other sorts of writing. So I want to tell you about the lessons that I learned. I want to talk about the lessons that I learned, and these are not radical lessons. The point here is not to tell you something you don't know about writing, but to tell you how I learned them and maybe give food for thought about how this could be incorporated into education. Okay, and I forgot to point out how the connection between writing for the newspaper and my academic writing was there in the beginning through the joint subject matter of Philip Roth. And I've written a lot about Philip Roth, both for the newspapers and in my academic writing. So in terms of subject matter, definitely those two types of writing come together. So, lesson one, you can finish a piece of writing. Writing an MA or PhD is a process that takes a very long time. Even if the same runs true for academic articles and books. So even if you do have external deadlines, they are often very far away and quite flexible. You think it's easy to forget that it's possible to finish a piece of writing. There's always, there's always more tweaking to do, more editing. another round of revision. Even after you finish a chapter or an article and you send it to an advisor, there's always another round of peer review or suggestions and more work to be done. Even after you submit the dissertation and you're a PhD, now they tell you, now revise it into an article, revise it into a book. It's never finished, sort of. It feels like that. Not so with reviews, it's the opposite. You are sent a book and you are expected to submit it right away, as quickly as possible. Right? Nobody cares about a review of a book that came out a year ago in the newspaper. So you need to read the book fairly quickly and start writing about it once you know what you want to say. So I'll tell you a trade secret. You usually start writing about the book before you finish it. Some reviewers, not me, never finish the book they write about. I always finished it, almost. So you begin the writing process and you have to finish it. You send it into the newspaper. And at least the way it worked for me, the next time I saw it was in print. So there was, rarely did they tell me, David, you have to add something, you have to subtract something. If it was too long, the editor would just cut it. So just the process of beginning and ending, and that's a very important lesson. I know in BA writing, it's common, but even in academic writing in higher level, try to set real and even implicit deadlines. Like find situation in which you make students feel like the writing will be less relevant if they don't submit it in time. Lesson 2. People may pay you for your people may pay me for my writing. As a student, you pay for the chance to have your writing read. Okay, the tuition includes the assurance that someone is going to read what you write. You basically pay for people to read you. You get rewarded by grades and by degrees, but usually not by material rewards. Even if you get a fellowship or something like that, it's over time. It's not for the writing itself. As a reviewer, actual money, currency is deposited into your bank account, usually very late, but they do deposit some money into your bank account. And it's an amazing feeling to know I'm going to the market, I'm going to buy this with the money I made writing. So academics usually don't like to talk about how money is involved in their work, but working with the newspapers showed me that my creativity and energy has some fungible value, even if not a lot. This gave me confidence and hope. And for students whose family doesn't understand how academia works, it can be a very important tool for self-advocating. So I'm sure some of you heard people say, what, they aren't paying you to speak at the conference? You have to prepare the lecture and you're the one paying? Doesn't make any sense. So sometimes getting money can help you explain your the amount of energy that you're spending on academia. And I know it's a very difficult advice. It's very difficult advice to follow, but it's worth thinking about giving some material rewards beyond grading. So lesson 3. People will read what I write. Okay, so when you write schoolwork, there's a sense that the audience is very limited. We know that for the BA, it's just the instructor. Higher level, it's a few more people, but even academic papers have very limited readership, sometimes less than one. With reviews for the newspaper, you get the feedback that people are reading. So one time I had an assignment to write about Mormons, and it was quite sympathetic, but I mentioned that they displaced Native American populations. And a Mormon Watch group published a short piece accusing me of giving Mormons a negative image. The feeling that actually somebody is watching at you, it's not very pleasant, but it's there. And more benignly, your parents see it in the newspaper. They tell you that friends of theirs saw it in the newspaper. I even one time saw a woman on the bus reading my review. So I tried to take a photograph of her, but it came out blurry, so I can't share this. But I saw her reading and my name in the newspaper, and she's dedicated to spending time with my writing. This is something that you don't really get.
Half a minute left.
I'm almost finished. You don't get that much with academic writing. So when you do try to simulate public writing with your students, try to bring it to a real public. For instance, Lekol Aruchot in Tel Aviv University was so successful in making itself present that it got a bad review in the newspaper. So it was a bad review, but at least it got attention. It's a different experience from just having, like the other students in the class read you or just the instructor. So really to sum up, I hope that my own lessons will help you think about these aspects in your own instructions and your own writing, and really encourage and facilitate moments that can teach the same things and similar issues that have to do with writing for the general public. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. That was inspiring. Very interesting angle. Thank you. And we're with no time wasting. We're moving on to Dr. Clodie Tal from Levinsky College of Education. Over to you, Clodie.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm Clodie Tal, and I'm currently the head of the MED program at the Levinsky College of Education in Early Childhood Education. And I'll be talking today about a blog that I'm directing and writing since 2015. And it's really a piece of work that gives me more pleasure probably than my academic writing. And I think that it might be of help to larger audiences like students, teachers, and parents. The goals of this lecture are to show how the blog works and to give an idea about the contents covered by it, to show the public and personal meaning of a professional blog as a tool of making professional wisdom and research finding accessible to educators, policymakers, students, and parents, and to be able to communicate with these audiences. And also to show at the end the commonalities and differences between academic, professional, and blog writing. Why did I decide to present at this conference? Because I liked very much its title, Blurring the Lines, Academic, Professional, and Popular Writing. I thought that it was exactly me, and my own professional development very much suited this. But also, as I prepared these lectures, I realized, and I will show that there are differences among these modes of writing. And I finally think that good academic, professional, and popular writing need to be interrelated. The blog is called Clodie Tal About Early Childhood Education. This is a picture of the blog. So why did I need a blog? The purpose of the blog was for the sake of my own professional development, for the sake of supporting educators' professional development, and also to resonate and criticize national educational policies and to influence them, to have an impact on this field, and to encourage discussions related to controversial issues in early childhood education. And also I remind you that professional development is defined as activities that develop an individual's skills, knowledge, expertise, and other characteristics the teachers. And the goal, which I intend to manage, are to update individuals' knowledge, to update individuals' skills, attitudes and approaches, to enable individuals to apply changes made to curricula, and to exchange information and expertise among teachers and others. Some data about the blog, these are the initial data that I had when I submitted the paper, or when I prepared this presentation a month ago. So at this point, the blog operates since September 2015. The total number of views is about 361,000 views. I wrote about 255 posts, usually once a week, and during the Corona crisis, twice a week or more. And the average length of posts is about 1,200 words. And the all-time high was in April 2020, 21,000 views, and really tripled during the Corona crisis. And I realized that because I wrote about the crisis in early childhood education, the audience found it relevant and helpful. And these are some data 1 month later, and it shows an increase in the number of views. Referrals to the blogs are made by search engines, the Facebook, almost all colleges of education, and lately from the Hebrew University, the Ministry of Education, and centers of professional development, the Pisgah centers. This is a picture of the views in June, and this is from July, and you can see here during April, May, and June, the number of views tripled pretty much. And I find it that, again, that the audience had an interest in what I had to write. An interesting aspect is looking at referrals coming from Facebook and search engines. And throughout the years of operation of the blog, the number of views from search engines increased very much as opposed to Facebook. And I tend to interpret this data as reflecting the blog being well known by the relevant audience. And also we can see the number of visitors and views ascended throughout the years of the operation of the blog. What were the topics covered by the blog? Policy related to education in general and early childhood education in particular, things like quality of preparation of educational staff, afternoon programs, tsaronim, attitude towards teaching about Holocaust in early childhood education. That's something that I do research, and I'm also writing in my blog. Societal issues such as human rights and inclusion, human rights and gender diversity, prejudice against teachers of Ethiopian descent. Also core competencies in education, stuff like empathy, self-regulation, self-effectiveness, grit, growth mindset, teamwork. Core competencies and practices in teacher education. I have also a special focus on education from birth to 3 years of age, with quite a critical view of the state of the education for the younger ages. And also I'm writing about practices and competencies required for working with infants and toddlers. Children's picture books, the psychologist's corner, coping with biting, setting limits, establishing routines, about reinforcement and punishment, stuff that is of interest to educators and parents. And I wrote about 15 posts related to early childhood education in light and shadow of the corona crisis, the very last of it being planning work in ECE, early childhood education for the school year 2020-2021, encouraging policymakers and educators to prepare themselves better than they did for the beginning of the next school year in the shadow of the corona crisis. So here I'm showing some of the most popular posts just to get an idea. This post was about including plans focusing on coping with social and behavioral problems, and it got about 9,000 views. And this is the stuff that was presented in the blog. Another one was an yearly plan for enhancing social skills and preventing behavior problems, and it got about 10,000 views. This is the main picture of helping to plan the year. These are some of the main competencies presented in the blog: self-efficacy, empathy, self-regulation, growth mindset and grit, and also the number of views for each of these posts. In the psychologist's corner, how to cope with toddlers biting, I wrote it quite recently and it was quite popular and well used.
Half a minute left, Jody.
How much time do I have
Half
left?
a minute.
Okay. The child initiates hanging the pacifiers. Also, what to do about putting down the family dog. I didn't find any stuff written about it when our dog was put down, so I decided to write down about this issue. These are some of the other posts. Many of them were focused really on the corona crisis. Also, some children's books related to corona crisis, both science books and literature. So just to finish up, the academic writing is evidence-based, accurate, and moral. The same should be about the professional blog. But it has a set structure as opposed to the professional blog, which is less formal and flexible. They are both intertextual. The professional blog is multi-modal, is more liberal than the academic writing, which is more conservative. It has, on the other hand, informal validity as opposed to more formal validity. In principle, the academic writing is motivated by the search of truth, but in practice, it is often motivated by the requirement from above to get tenure or academic ranks, as opposed to the professional blog, which needs to be coherent. The danger is that it might be commercially motivated. It is motivated by the will to have an impact on practice. It is quite often, as in my case, self-driven. Often encouraged by policymakers. It is a bridge between research and theory on the one hand. And just to sum up, the blog is effective, it is well known, it succeeds to draw relevant audiences. Numerous referrals come from search engines and from colleges of education. There is a frequent and consistent writing and a large base of up-to-date content that are relevant in early childhood education for teachers, parents, and policymakers. And posts are responsive and writing is dynamic. A hands-on approach led by involvement in society and education. Posts, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudie. Very interesting, very informative. We don't have time, so I'm just quickly moving on to our last speaker, Nadine Doe from Tel Aviv University.
Yes, thank you. Can you see me?
Yes, please stick to the time, 10 minutes, so we have some time for questions at the end.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so I hope you can see my presentation. My presentation is entitled Fan Fiction as a New Writing Medium, and it discusses a phenomenon that has become international and widespread. It explains what this phenomenon is, which platforms it occupies, its consideration as a new movement in our traditional way of thinking about writing, and how it can be implemented in education. Fan fiction, for those who don't know the term, often refers to stories written by fans based on other literary work, the use of characters, plot lines, and word building from a previously published work. And due to its popularity as a medium for writing and publishing, fan fiction has lately received new and rising academic attention. And it is often seen as an expansion of the work and as interpretive fan engagement. Indeed, fan fiction goes beyond the boundaries of writing new stories by allowing more readers and fans to become writers themselves. It provides writers with a platform on which they can easily and directly communicate with each other. And this has resulted in a dramatic change in the culture of reading, transforming it from an ostensibly inactive phenomenon to a proactive one. If we think about writing then and now, and when we examine these fan fiction stories, many notions of what writing is can change. We relate to literary works and to authors differently now, and instead we begin to imagine varied ways of writing, reading, and interacting with authors and their work. Fan fiction, because it takes a universe that is already existent, it ultimately makes it different by offering different perspectives. And these stories enable the audience, us, to redefine our initial understanding of what reading, writing, and authorship mean. Undoubtedly, of course, fan fiction relies heavily on social media like forums, blogs, Twitter, etc. And the fan fiction writer's response to literary work is primarily determined by the level of access they have to the internet. And although fan fiction is not really a new phenomenon, no period has seen such a large body of fan fiction being produced as it is seen in the age of the internet. There are many platforms that fans can write and publish their work on, and I've included some of the most popular ones. You have fanfiction.net, which is considered to be the world's largest archive, with over 12 million users, and it's mainly used by younger teenagers between the ages of 14 and 17 and has stories in over 30 languages. Archive of Our Own is another website, which is rated as the most popular fanfiction site and has over 6 million stories. We have Wattpad, which is relatively new, and it has around 80 million users, and as it also have an app which allows for easier access. Their slogan is "Where Stories Live," and it offers star ratings to writers and gives them the opportunity to later publish their work and or to adapt it into films. Last but not least is a website called Kinderwalds, which unfortunately was shut down after 5 years of its release. And this platform was different because it paid the users between $1 to $4 and sold their work as ebooks. As you can see in both of these graphs, the new advances enable even younger fans to start participating in this writing culture. If you see on the left in 2008, the age started at 18. However, in 2014, it began even under the age of 15. And unfortunately, there aren't any new research that show the average age now. However, websites like Wattpad allow access to users that are 13 and above. Fan fiction is clearly influenced by social networks, and they play a vital role in giving readers the opportunities to discuss and debate the works that are being published. And one researcher, Caroline Haythornthwaite, who is a professor at the University of British Columbia in Canada, believes that this results in closing the gap between authors and readers, and both of them get an opportunity to express opinions and portray their creativity. Social media has clearly changed how readers approach popular literature by connecting like-minded fans across the world. These fans can discuss their own interpretations of the text among themselves, and each of them is bringing different details and their own point of view. With this pooling of intellectual power, we can achieve conclusions that a single person may not be able to notice by himself. And this interactive nature of social media tools, such as discussion forums, for example, help writers to weave different narratives, which Henry Jenkins, for example, suggests should be considered literature in itself. He says that by posting their content online, young writers gain insight about methods of writing through an active and collaborative peer review process. Additionally, fanfiction has become a prominent mode used to overcome barriers of gender, race, age, and language. And in her article, Fanfiction, Writing and the Construction of Space, Rebecca Black believes that what makes this fanfiction an important genre is that it's the only medium through which fans are able to expand upon and express their discernment of the texts. She says that fanfiction allows writers to develop their identities and express themselves as individuals. Therefore, we can consider fanfiction as not only teaching writing skills, but it's also a creative response to literature. It challenges students to deeply understand the literary work and enables them to write from different perspectives while still allowing them insights into the text itself. Writing fan fiction, therefore, can motivate students because they are writing about material that they are passionate about. And for example, there is a book called Writers in the Secret Garden, which was published by Aragon and Davis, where they explain something they term as distributed mentorship. And they describe that people on these websites are teaching one another how to write through collective learning, and that this traditional two-person approach to writing between student and teacher or mentor and mentee has changed to encompass an entire community by receiving reviews from said community. These reviews are often positive, and in fact, Aragon and Davis found that out of a sample of 4,500 reviews on Fanfiction Net, only 1% were non-constructive. Fanfiction, therefore, can engage young writers and connects them with others to help in their writing career. And many fanfiction use a beta or an editor, who's usually another fanfic writer, to go over their work, which is very similar to how editors operate in the traditional writing process. After the beta edits the work, the writer publishes it on the site, usually in intervals as serialized work, and gets feedback from a whole community of readers and writers. This feedback is often then used to write following chapters that cater to the audience's taste. Here are two examples of writers who started by writing fan fiction. Colin Mitchell, who says that fan fiction uses, because it uses different characters, it's easier to write because they are building on previously made characters, but at the same time, it gives you creative freedom. And Erica Smith, who says that thanks to fan fiction, she has a career in writing and she became a journalist later on. Fan fiction does not only allow students to become critical of the text itself, but it also gives them an opportunity for collaboration and for giving constructive feedback to their peers. Unlike writing a completely new story as suggested in writing fan fiction, students are focusing on improving their skills by using familiar settings and themes. Therefore, we can consider fan fiction as a strong tool, not only for teaching students to read and write, but to also give and accept constructive feedback, which can also improve young learners' analytical skills. These new opportunities that are now available for young and adult writers provide a medium that helps shape future novelists, poets, and even playwrights. And it also provides opportunities for later publication. And I'll give a famous example, 50 Shades of Grey, which has become popular worldwide. And it is based on a fan fiction written about Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. I will conclude this presentation by saying that fanfiction gives rise to a new way of looking at reading and writing, along with a different perspective on how we consume narrative as a culture today. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Wonderful. 3 different angles, 3 different genres and their relationship with the academic genre. So over to you, audience. We have 5 minutes for questions. Remember to unmute yourselves before you ask, and address the speaker with your question, please. Anyone? Have we got a written question?
I'll ask. Here, let me go on to video. Yeah. Sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. What extent writing either the blog or writing the book reviews fed back into your academic research? You know, sometimes it seems like it's just maybe a distraction or something you do separately, but I'm interested in the extent to which having a wider or a different or a more diverse audience helped you think of new research questions or deeper ways of exploring different angles.
Was it referred to me?
Yes.
Really, I see myself in a continuous process of communication with the audience, and quite often I do research on following up on questions asked by the audience, or it gives me ideas. It's certainly bidirectional. There was a piece on boundaries that I wrote following reactions from the audience. For example, there were many other examples, but I can't remember right now.
Thank you. Any other questions?
As well?
Yes, David?
So in terms of attention to the audience, so the other things are more about the process and confidence and things like that, but attention to an actual audience, I think that really improved my writing significantly. Always picture somebody, imagine somebody and write for them. And also specifically, I write a lot about reception and reviews of the literary works that I discuss. So really knowing this genre from the writer's perspective shaped how I write about the culture and the literary world.
Okay. So we had 1 question. Any other questions before we?
Can I ask Nadine a question?
Of course you may.
Nobody else wants to. Thank you for the interesting talk. I actually use kind of fan fiction as part of my assignments in literature classes, like write a letter to the character or things like that. But how do we enter the community aspect of it into the classroom? What thoughts do you have about that aspect?
Right. Thank you, David. First of all, I think in my classes, for example, I use fan fiction as the second stage. So after you start using it with your students in literature courses, and for example, they write a letter to the author or one of the characters, etc., you can ask them to publish their work in all of these online communities, such as fanfiction.net or Archive of Our Own, and you can monitor the responses they get, and you can see the reviews as well as they can, and therefore it is built in a kind of community or peer work. I would also suggest using it in different classes as well if you have, or together in the classes as one student would be the writer and another student would be a peer reviewer or a beta, and they can review each other's work. But I do recommend that using all of these websites because they offer validation and positive feedback for their students' writing.
Would be interesting to see how writing these different genres and then going back to writing an academic research paper, how that affects, to follow that process, what that does to actually, to change the academic genre, blurring the lines, as we say. Yeah. Okay, so anything else for the last minute? Otherwise, we're going to, yes, in fact, it's 1 o'clock, so we should stop here. Thank you very, very much for inspiring presentations, 3 of you, and see you in the next session.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Bye-bye.